What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Walkout Network. It's your man, Ant Walker, here with another edition of Unleash, the weekly panel discussion show. This time, we actually have a guest. So let's go ahead and introduce him first. You know his good work at My MMA News. You also know him as El Presidente at Fight Library. He is the man, Blaine Henry. Blaine, what's going on?
What is up, guys? Thank y'all for having me. I'm blessed. I'm so happy to be on the show after missing last week. I was mad at myself. Life got in the way, but guess what? We're going to talk some scrapping, and yeah, El Presidente, El Chapo, whatever you want to call me. I'm down with it, bro.
He is the Fight Library Dana Trump. All right, so of course we've got the jack of all trades who's mastered them all, the senior editor of Shirtout.com, Mr. Ben Duffy. Ben, what's going on?
Hey, I'm doing really, really well. You know, my picks this past weekend were complete garbage. I learned a lot, so I'm just ready to share all the things I learned with you.
All right, sounds good. And of course, every week the panel is anchored by the man with the stats, the facts, the figures, and the numbers. He is the associate editor of Sherdog.com, Mr. Jay Petrie. Jay, what's going on, brother?
You know, my picks were also garbage, but I don't know if I learned quite as much. But I will share with you something I did learn over this past week. The stat of the week is 1. So across UFC history, we've heard way over 100 times fighters have walked out to AC/DC songs. You know AC/DC. Even Ant knows who AC/DC is. For the first time that we have on record, a fighter walked out to the AC/DC song Big Balls. Jordan Levitt walked out to Big Balls, and he power slammed Matt Wyman in 22 seconds. So he's got the biggest balls of them all, ladies and gentlemen.
I hear he's on medical suspension for injuring those balls in the split after the fight. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the action that we saw on Saturday, but in more of a meta sense. So we'll talk about the main event. We'll talk about some of the spectacular knockouts on the card. But first, we had 3 fights drop out the day of the fight. 2 of which, of course, had to do with COVID-19. So now we have the so-called bubble that the UFC apparently has been working in. That myth has been shattered thanks to none other than noted scholar Mike Perry's cornerman. So, fellas, where are we going here? Like, the Vegas bubble, it's clearly a myth now. What should we be doing about COVID-19 as far as it relates to the UFC and the Apex Center?
Now, remind me, wasn't Mike Perry's corner the guy that bought a seat from Reddit? I believe that he was the Reddit MMA guy. I need to look more into that. So, hey, man, if we get an expose any way we can, I will take it. This could have been my I'm Not Surprised, Mr. Falcon segment, where the fighters come into the hotel, get tested, quarantine for a little while, get their test results, and then can bail and just go to Vegas and just wander around and go to casinos and go drinking or whatever. I mean, obviously only the heavyweights will be doing that, but the point is that they're just going to be cruising and going to be around other humans. Now, the whole point of a bubble is that there's no outside contact. There's no anything else going on. So how can this be? This isn't a bubble. This isn't like Bellator, which has their little fight sphere, which apparently, according to guys that we've had cover the events, you have to be there. You have to stay there, and then you can go home. So the UFC is clearly missing the boat here. But something else that I've been really paying attention to that has been really bothering me is that the UFC will have fighters that test positive for COVID 2 weeks or less, and they will reschedule their fights 2 weeks or less later. Like, I understand the CDC may have squished down the quarantine time, but there are fighters that are going to be going into next week's fight camp with COVID. I mean, it's not crazy to think that multiple fighters are going to be dealing with that. Kevin Holland is fighting this weekend. He had COVID a week ago. So I don't understand what's going on here. I feel like we need some explanations, and we're not getting any, and the silence is really deafening for me.
I'm with you on that. There's a lot of transparency that's been lacking here. So Blaine, what have you made of all this? The shattering of the myth of the bubble and what it's done to I can't necessarily say that it's wreaked havoc on the UFC schedule, but clearly the way they've handled COVID-19 has some serious issues. So Blaine, where do you think the solution is?
Have a bubble. Actually do what you've set out and done. Think about it for a second. Dana White started this bubble in the pandemic, and he basically got complacent, like, oh yeah, this is easy, we got this. The NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball all took their notes from Dana White. And you go into like Fight Island, and they actually do the bubble, and it works fantastic because you don't know anyone on Fight Island. There's no oil sheiks that are gonna risk themselves for COVID. So yeah, actually just getting there and actually do the bubble. You came up with the plan. You have the idea. Just do it. It's not that hard. It really isn't, because you've done it before. It happens, I believe, because they're just complacent, though. I feel like, oh yeah, COVID ain't nothing. You're not worried about it. You're having these cards that are just falling apart. We had 8 fights on this weekend's card. 8. That's ridiculous. They had so much filler time because they had to fill time. I'm assuming because ESPN requires these cards to be a certain length, that we had to sit through a bunch of crap, especially after the knockouts and stuff. So do the bubble. That's it. Do the bubble. You have a bunch of fights and we're good.
Yeah, so like the NBA, seems like they did a pretty damn good job with their bubble. We weren't hearing about a bunch of games being canceled due to COVID. I think the NFL is not exactly college football. No. They haven't exactly done what they were supposed to do in this regard.
No, like James Harden is taking sanitizer to the strip club with him. You know,
you got to sanitize the booty.
I will say in the NFL's defense. I will say in the NFL's defense, is a 52-man roster is a lot easier than a 12-man roster to contain. I got a friend who works for Vice. He does the podcast and stuff there. Sam Egan. Shout out Bajrang. What's up? So he does the editing for podcasts, and they did an episode on the NBA bubble, and it was really in depth about how the bubble works and, you know, how they're bored as hell in there. But you know what? These athletes are sacrificing, and these UFC athletes need to sacrifice as well their enjoyment for the sport for their job, basically, you know?
So who do you think has been handling their version of the bubble worse? The NFL, college football, or the UFC?
The NFL. Ugh. NFL's bad, man. It's rough. They're canceling games and they're letting people play with COVID. And
that's the thing. That's the one that gets you. Is they're like, well, he was tested on Saturday, so let's hope that he doesn't have it now. Suddenly,
it's bad, man.
It ain't it. It's. Well, I mean, we have 10 fights scheduled for the pay-per-view card this weekend. We're down to 10 fights now, and we're apart on Monday night. Like, this will be released on Tuesday. We're very possibly may have 9 fights by the time you guys are listening to this broadcast. Like, this isn't good.
You get a main card shot. You get a main card shot. You get a main card shot. That's kind of what's going on in the fighter meeting. But let's actually talk about some of the action that went down Saturday. Marvin Vettori wins a pretty exciting decision over Jack Hermansson. Fun fight to watch. Now with this win under his belt, is Vettori one win away from a shot at the belt?
If things break the right way, he might actually be. He shouldn't be. Let me establish that before all else. In terms of competitive merit, in terms of deserve, in terms of any kind of legitimate ladder of title contention, he does not deserve a title shot 2 fights from now. But there's a good possibility it can happen. He just beat Hermansson. This weekend we have Jacare and Holland. Unless the winner of that is Jacare Souza in extremely impressive fashion, where, you know, they give him a title shot as just kind of a sentimental going away gift. I don't know why an ass kicking is a gift, but Vettori's got that ace. He's got the ace up his sleeve. He's already fought Adesanya, and while the split decision on paper is a little bit overstating the case, he did give him a tough fight. And as soon as he starts jawing about that, Adesanya is absolutely the guy that's going to come back at him with the expected storm of homophobic slurs.
Yeah.
All right, so time out. You say Vettori does not deserve a title shot after another win?
Who could he possibly beat who could he realistically fight? and beat in his next fight. He's calling for Paulo Costa.
Paulo Costa, he's the number 5 contender now. Who's ahead of him? Yoel Romero, not in the UFC. You got Robert Whittaker. Izzy's not going to fight him again. Paulo Costa, Izzy's not going to fight him again. Vettori's the next in line, sure to get a win. Izzy's probably going to go beat up Jan Blachowicz, which makes me sad. But if he one more win, he's there. You know, it's fresh blood. It's got a story behind it.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't disagree with a lot of that. Jay, what do you think?
I'm just like, even in, let me throw this out there. Even in the depleted and just kind of busted up and wide open middleweight division, to get a title shot off of maybe like one top 10 win, it's gonna suck.
I mean, we're in a messed up era though, and we're in an era where, and I've talked about this week in and week out, that former champions have an easier path to the title. Weidman's a win away from a title shot. Whittaker could very possibly get a title shot depending on how things shake out, just because they were the former champion. Man, I don't want to see Vettori getting a title shot anytime soon because of who he'll jump over. Because yes, he's on a 4-fight win streak now, which by the way is the longest win streak of any Italian fighter to ever fight in the octagon. So 4 wins in a row. That's the I don't want to say the bellwether, but that's the top mark for an Italian fighter. I don't know. I just feel like there's more that he should do to get there. And I can't really say otherwise, because fighters are getting title shots off of losses, multiple fighters getting shots off of losses. So I'm half expecting that like Jared Cannonier will get the next title shot because he lost his last fight. I mean, this is the kind of situation where I really want to see some top 10 fights, some intermingling, then to really flesh it out. Like give him like a Darren Till, give him like a Derek Brunson, give him maybe the winner of Uriah Hall, Chris Weidman too. Like something to really kind of give us definition, because it just feels like he's not there yet. And I don't know. I don't want to see, honest and truly, I don't want to see him fight Adesanya again. Like there's no way I say this having picked Hermansson to style on this guy, only for Vettori to bust him up. But I just can't see him having anything that can threaten Adesanya, and that's kind of where I hope for in a challenger, to see, well, I can see him having a path to victory, and a split decision loss that was almost to the level of a Chris Lee split decision doesn't inspire confidence for a rematch in the future for me.
You know what? I think under normal circumstances, I think this would be a ridiculous premise for Vettori to be that close to a title shot, but we're not under normal circumstances on multiple fronts. I mean, with Yoel Romero now being outside of the UFC, being sort of, you know, someone who I think could safely be the gatekeeper for the division. With him gone, you don't have that for sure litmus test that would say, okay, this guy's ready for a title shot. Also, the champion.
Eric Brunson's that guy.
Yeah, Derek Brunson can be that guy, I guess, but it doesn't sound as good as Romero.
You're right. Yeah,
and they're saying that even with Whittaker, it doesn't sound as good as Whittaker, simply because of the history between him and Romero. I think also too, Adesanya is temporarily leaving the division as far as we know right now, and he's supposed to be fighting for the light heavyweight title soon. If that's the case, the division has time to just sit there. Vettori can benefit from that inactivity from guys who are higher on the ladder, and slot himself in there. If he gets a win over the winner of Uriah Hall and Chris Weidman, let's just say he gets a win over Uriah Hall, I think, and if it's a fun fight, yeah, he probably will slot himself in there, because while that's not necessarily title shot worthy, it is in this era.
And I kind of want to point something out too that I'm struggling with, is that Marvin Vettori is most likely going to be a top 5 middleweight on Tuesday, because Jack Hermansson was the number 4 guy and he busted him up. It was on short notice. There was a whole bunch of situations leading up to this fight, but he pounded on the number 4 guy. So just pretend we'll do the switcheroo game, and now boom, Vettori's number 4. He has Adesanya champ, Whittaker, Costa, Cannonier are above him. So maybe you're onto something, Ant.
Speaking Speaking of switcheroo, is there anybody at 185 pounds that you would give a better shot at beating Adesanya than Gegard Mousasi right now?
Gegard Mousasi's terrible. No, he wouldn't beat Izzy.
I think he's the toughest fight. I truly do think he's a tough fight because Mousasi's chin is
a middleweight.
Mousasi's chin is like granite.
Yeah. I think I'd say
don't get me on Mousasi, bro.
Mousasi would be number one, but on a good day, on his best day, Uriah Hall.
Spin kick
Uriah on his Hall? Best day. The X factor is how often does Uriah Hall have his best day?
Like every 4 fights or so.
Yeah, so if we get him in the rotation the right way, yeah, we can see something spectacular. But I would there's a guy selling corn right outside my house and blowing a horn. Anyway,
ladies and gentlemen, Compton, California.
Yeah, this is what you get in LA. All right. Well, what the hell were we talking about?
Best chance to beat Izzy would be Daniel Cormier.
Okay.
Nobody at middleweight. There's nobody at middleweight touching Izzy.
Okay, I get what you're doing now. I was like,
yeah.
All right.
Nope.
I couldn't picture Cormier at 185. You'd have to cut a turkey leg off or something.
He could do it. He just have to, leave the Popeyes alone.
Yeah, we said that about Roy Nelson, though.
That's not true.
Roy Nelson never left the Popeyes alone either.
The last time Daniel Cormier
have you seen that guy's workout videos?
Do you know about
Roy Nelson is a maniac.
Yeah, he's a maniac on the Whoppers too.
Yeah. He's a barbecue man. I'll give him that.
All right, so fellas, before we go further into the depths of foolishness, let's go ahead and keep things moving because we did have some really cool knockouts on the card Saturday. So Blaine, I'm going to start with you. What was the most impressive knockout to you on the card?
I was not, what's his name, that knocking out Matt Wyman. That was actually kind of sad to me. Ilia Topuria was the best knockout on the card. And I'll say this because it wasn't a fresh knockout. The way he set it up was beautiful. He comes with the body shots early on, looking like Mike Tyson in the 90s. He does a good job. I recently released a piece on Rockfin Premium about Ilia Topuria. So he did a good job. He has a lot of stuff to work, but keep in mind, this guy's a grappler, and we've seen him work leaps and bounds. He beat Yusuf Zalal, who's a Moroccan kickboxer who's fantastic in his debut. That shows you how much faith that the UFC has in these brave guys, especially these Georgians. Ilia Topuria sets up the body great. He parries, he pushes, gets the distance, and what's his name? Damon Jackson throws a lead hook. He gauges it perfect. Whoop, hook. And then over the top, it's over. It was beautiful. It was perfectly set up.
Yeah, this is good. That was like a textbook knockout. It was gorgeous. Ben, what's your pick?
I mean, honestly, my pick is Topuria over Jackson, just for all the reasons he mentioned. And I seriously think that last left to the liver, that might have been enough to stop the fight if he just put his hands up and walked away. I think Jackson might have just been like, no mas anyway. But since he already spoke about it in such good detail, I will give some love to that slam knockout. I mean, the one thing I'll say is Wyman looked like he'd never been picked up before. He clearly is not back in the game. Like he looked like me getting picked up. That is not a mistake he would have made 5 years ago. But the way that that Levitt set it up, and they talked about it ad nauseum, where he framed with his forearm basically just against his neck and jaw, just so that all the impact was going to go right into. And at least Wyman turned his head, so he got the side of his head instead of just a fucking brain stem bashed in. But that was sensational. Like Jay, of course, will tell you that it is tied for the second fastest slam knockout in UFC history, but it's the gnarliest of them. You had Shamrock smashing Zinoviev, but what he really did was he broke his collarbone or something. Yeah. It's not like Zinoviev didn't know what was going on, even though he probably wished he was unconscious at the time. And then you have, of course, Josh Berkman putting Sam Morgan halfway through the canvas. But that was just the cleanest and deadest of the dead slam knockouts. So
we're forgetting about Rose.
Straight mean.
I have forgotten about that. It didn't happen.
I'm sorry.
Oh, Rose.
That was. I mean, it was so mean spirited too. The way he framed on him perfectly. It just held his head in place.
I think it was even better than the Rose knockout, because like Rose like knew where she was. She wasn't like out for like 2 minutes with her toes curled, you know. Like Wyman,
Oh man,
I don't know. I don't know
up.
if he passed third grade the first time, but he's gonna have to take it again.
Yeah, like Andrade didn't have to go apologize to Pat Barry afterwards.
Yeah,
so, I think there's a big difference there. Now I think Jay. All right, yeah. I did before I go on my tangent. Jay, what was your favorite of the knockouts?
Well, I mean, it has to be the slam, and because slams are so rare, comparatively speaking, like we see a beautiful liver shot, and then you can see that kind of moment of ooh, oh no, something bad happened to my life, and it's all like that. But the slam knockout was just so emphatic, and the apologizing to the wife and everything like that. But in the essence of making it an interesting show, I will say that Mowgli Benitez's performance was spectacular and one I didn't quite see coming, mostly because Justin James, sure, he's not a big established name. He's only been in the UFC like, I don't know, a year maybe or so, something like that. He's only had a couple fights. He had a really fun knockout of Macho Camacho or whatever Frank the Tank is calling himself now. But he's a really hard-headed brawler, and he's never been knocked out before. And to see him kind of buckle down on one of his big overhand rights and Mowgli Benitez time the knee to the body and send him flying. I enjoy the knockouts where fighter A hits fighter B so hard fighter B goes flying. I enjoy that moment, that little cinematic thing like you see on a UFC video game. You see the mouthpiece getting knocked out and you see the fighter going flying from the knee and stuff like that. And then he came over and just elbowed his face off until Mark Smith's like, no mas, no mas. For a guy not really known as a knockout guy, like he's I think he has actually his own slam knockout in the past, oddly enough. But I don't really picture Mowgli Benitez as a knockout guy. I kind of might now, just seeing that knee do that to poor Justin Guitar Hero James, which is a great nickname.
Yeah, I mean that was a fantastic knockout. That's actually the one I wanted to pick. So I guess in the interest of the entertainment of the folks watching and listening, I'll talk about Jamal Hill over OSP. Just crisp boxing to keep him perfectly at the end of his punches the entire time and overwhelm him to the point that the ref has to intervene before his body gives out. That's always something great to see. It's always very entertaining to see that. And I think also in context of what it means for the division, it's a really, really big deal because 205 is on the come up right now. And Jamal Hill just definitely barged his way into some of those conversations about exciting prospects coming up here. So overall, fantastic knockouts and great technique. All of those showed incredible technique. All of them showed a lot of foresight and planning and thought into how they executed. And you love to see it. I love especially the emphasis on body shots Saturday. Body shots are just such a beautiful thing in MMA, and it just tears of joy. So except when I get hit with one training and then tears of pain. So let's move on a little bit here to our segment Eating Crow. Now, Jay and Ben, I have a feeling you're going to have a lot of cannon fodder for this because you were describing how bad your picks were. So I'll start with you two. What did you get wrong about the event over the weekend? It's got you seasoning up some crow to take a good old bite.
Just 5 rounds of total, absolute, pure, unadulterated. Okay, no, 4 rounds because Hermansson had a good third round. 4 solid rounds and a 10-8, so maybe give me 5 rounds actually because of the 49-45 that I gave the fight of just heaping, steaming crow that I reviewed this fight. I saw what happened. I did some tape study to see what they brought to the table, and I didn't see a path to victory for Marvin Vettori. As a prime pick, I looked at the betting odds and saw, wow, Jack Hermansson's an underdog. He should be a minus 150 favorite based on level of competition. I mean, all the things he does, his skill set, and Vettori is a very, to quote my friend Jack Slack, a meat and potatoes guy. Vettori is a very, he can do some good stuff sometimes, but what do you look at Vettori and go, man, he's a really good blank. He's an all around guy. That's what the kind of thing. I touched on how Vettori had never gotten a knockdown before. And that even though he has a volume striking approach, he doesn't have quite the pop that he comes from behind his strikes, and then he drops Jack Hermansson in the first round and very nearly gets a finish. So, like, about as far off as a pick as I could make was that main event. And let me tell you, I wish I could say I learned more about that fight, because I'm still not sold on Vettori, and I'm more wondering if that was Hermansson. But well done, Marvin Vettori. You got a liar out of me.
Ben, what are you eating crow for this week?
Well, I got both the main and co-main event wrong, and I got them wrong in different ways. I just thought Jack Hermansson is flat out a better fighter than Marvin Vettori almost everywhere, and I thought he was going to outclass him badly. I was dead wrong. I thought Ovin St. Preux versus Jamal Hill is a fight where I would have favored Hill a year or two from now, but I thought Ovin St. Preux was just going to be a little too wily and too hard to prepare for, too much too soon for Hill. I was wrong there. I don't want to really dwell on either of those because I already feel like an asshole. But in the interest of making myself feel like the biggest asshole possible, I'm going to take this time and this platform to issue an apology. I have wronged Jake Collier in my mind. It was just too easy to laugh. His Sherdog Fight Finder profile from just like 3 years ago, not even that long ago, is of him as this ripped middleweight, looking like Luke Rockhold on the scale. I mean, not quite as handsome like up here, but same general idea. And so for him to come back as a heavyweight who was just pushing the limit, I mean, he's weighed in at like 264 and a half for both of his fights this year. And that does not happen by accident. No one just wakes up at 264 and a half pounds. They at least had to like take a healthy dump that morning. Like he's had to work just to make the heavyweight limit in the UFC. And for as much as I've made fun of him, I picked his fight against John Vellante dead wrong. Because the thing about Vellante is he was a big-bodied light heavyweight. And when I saw especially that Vellante had weighed in for this fight like 10 pounds lighter than he did for that ridiculous travesty against Maurice Green a couple months ago, I said, okay, this is Vellante actually taking his third career act a little more seriously. This like Collier's toast. Because Vellante, somewhere inside there, is still the guy that like handed Saparbek Safarov his first loss. Is still the guy that's beaten some top 10 light heavyweights. I was dead wrong. Not only did Collier win, but he won in just completely uncontroversial fashion, like it was the most natural thing in the world. If he just sparked Vellante in 30 seconds, there would have been questions left. But instead, he was the lighter man on his feet. He had the greater work rate. And by the third round, he was the less apparently tired man. If Jake Collier, with all this baggage, can be an effective heavyweight, more power to him. Go for it. I mean, it's not like he was a world beater at middleweight. It's not like we're missing out on a possible challenger for Israel Adesanya. So why not move up to the weight class where literally anybody is 4 wins away from a title shot? I'm now talking about Jake Collier in a way I did not expect to be talking about him a month or two ago. I'm like, well, what if he does the Tanner Boser thing and he just kind of meets in the middle and gets down to like 245? I bet he'd be really good. And, by standards of really good that, include heavyweight. I apologize to Jake Collier. I wronged you in my mind. I made premature judgments about your fitness to fight, like your literal fitness to fight, and how seriously you were taking your fight career. And now I'm actually mildly interested in seeing your next fight. So that's 264.5 pounds of crow for me.
Sounds delicious. Blaine, what are you eating crow for this weekend?
Ben kind of took mine, and I kind of eat crow on ever tuning into unranked heavyweight ever again. But I'm gonna change it up since he done talked about it. OSP, I thought that was a layup for OSP for sure, and Hill comes in there and just beats him up. Worse than Vettori beat up Hermansson, if you want to know the truth. It was just quicker, and the ref was very forgiving as well. OSP, I thought he had like here's a win for you, brother. We're gonna test this young buck out against you, and Hill came in there and really did his thing. So yeah, I'm eating crow on OSP all the way.
Yeah, you guys pretty much left no meat on the bones for me to pick here. So we're just gonna keep things moving. I really think that there were a lot of surprises on this card. So I mean, considering it was an 8-fight card that extended for 12 hours or whatever it was, at least when the fights were on, it was entertaining.
Let me ask you guys something real quick. I can't ask Duffy because he knows the answer to this. So there were 8 fights, 8 favorites, only one underdog won on this fight card. Which fighter was the underdog that won their fight? Or Blaine?
Vettori, I believe, right? Oh, he wasn't the underdog. Oh, interesting.
You think Blaine? Who is the betting underdog?
He's having some tech.
He's no tech.
Yeah, he has some tech issue. I know Jamal Hill was a favorite. Yep. I remember hearing that on the broadcast. So
it was Jake Collier.
Collier.
And you know how I picked that fight correctly? Thanks to my little friend right here.
All right, fellas. So let's move along to the greatest title segment in all of media. I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons. This is where we share something that surprised us, seriously surprised us, or ironically did not. So we have a lot to choose from. The UFC, of course, was in action. We had some LFA. We had some boxing as well between Errol Spence and Garcia. So, fellas, I'll start with you, Ben. What is your I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons moment this week?
I'll shy away from like the big headlines and just speak about something a little closer to home. A couple weeks ago, right after his fight against Rhys McKee, I spoke with UFC welterweight Alex Morono for a while. Just the substance of our conversation was kind of the adjustments that he has had to make as a gym owner, a coach, and a fighter in the year of COVID, because all 3 of those roles have required him to adjust his life in different ways. You know, obviously, as a fighter, but then, you know, also as a gym owner, just basically having to do virtual classes, take over the teaching of basically all of his classes on his own once the gym reopened. It was an interesting conversation. The piece is up on SureDog, but I talked to him about when he wanted to fight next, and he said he wanted to fight sometime in April, like right after the Venom deal started. He's very excited for the Venom deal. He's like, I've got 11 Reebok fight kits at this point. I'd like to fight like right when I'd like to be like the first fighter to, you know, get one of the Venom kits. Turns out he is going to be fighting Anthony Pettis in a couple weeks. And that legitimately surprised me, because welterweight is one of the hardest divisions in the UFC. Well, it's the hardest division in the UFC to break into the top 15, even above lightweight. But it is probably also the hardest one for, I would say, non-name fighters to get a fight with a big name. You know, there's kind of that invisible hard ceiling there. And so for Alex to get a fight with, you know, one of the biggest names in the UFC in Pettis, even if he's not at his absolute competitive peak, legitimately surprised me. You know, I'm happy for a fighter who's local here to Houston and, you know, is always a really good guy, really supportive of the local scene. But yeah, legitimately surprised. It's a great opportunity for him. And yeah, always good to see a fighter kind of break through that invisible ceiling and get a chance, you know, at the big table, or at least, you know, the big name table. That it would have been the last fight on his deal, on his current deal, is also an interesting thing. I need to ask him whether he signed a new deal before signing for this fight.
And it's a really big step up in competition too. I mean, like you think of it like Jamal Hill suddenly facing OSP. Alex Morono goes from Rhys McKee to Anthony Pettis. Woo.
Yeah, that's a huge leap. It's like a Chimaev leap. Jay, what is your I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons moment this week?
So talking about Chimaev, no, I'm kidding. I don't have anything about that guy. I have a fun story, just a fun little international tale to regale you with, of a once considered UFC heavyweight prospect named Chai Lewis-Parry, a gigantic 6'8", 6'9" kickboxer, sledgehammers for hands, very deliberate personality. He is his own man. If you listen to his interviews, you could understand what he is from watching one interview. So he tried to sign with the UFC back last year, and entered the USADA testing pool to say, okay, hey, I'm here. I need to test. I'm international, so I'm going to test positive, or I'm going to submit to tests so that you can then put me on the roster, which is the standard way that fighters are supposed to get signed without these little exemptions and short notice, things like that. So Lewis-Parry enters the USADA testing pool, and he takes tests in September last year, a couple different tests, and he fails them about as badly as one can fail them. Like Alex Nicholson levels of, a Russian GNC level of failing tests. Like Tristanolone, Stanozolol, DHCMT, a whole bunch of anabolic, like hardcore anabolic steroids. This isn't some, oh, oops, I must have had a GNC bottle that went wrong. No, these are like designer level steroids this guy was taking, which kind of makes sense why he's 9-0 and 2 draws and 2 no contests for fouls, but let's not talk about those. But he's a knockout machine. And you look at him and you go, oh, I understand. There it is. So USADA has a clause that says, look, we understand international fighters aren't subject to these testing standards. They may take substances that are banned here because they weren't banned over there. So we're going to let you come into the pool if you announce that, hey, I took something like meldonium, which was a popular one for Russian Olympians. If you took something, let us know. We're not going to flag you. We'll just wait till it's out of your system. We'll test you. And then once you're clean, we'll let you in. So he had an out and decided, no, I'm not going to tell him. I'm not going to tell him anything. I'm not going to do anything at all. I'm not taking anything. You're taking something. So when it comes to the appeal process, this is the story that keeps on giving. I tell you guys. So the appeal process comes out. He appeals on the basis of tainted supplements. All right. So okay. If you had like oscarine or kangaroo meat, and you'd be like, oh man, I ate something and I had it and boom, I tested positive. It wasn't that. So he submits these substances to USADA. He submits these substances that he or his team, this is all a matter of public record. So there's no accusations here. This is straight fact. That he and his team specifically had doctored to add those substances into the supplements and say, look, these were tainted with this stuff. Here it is. You should take it. And USADA's like, seriously? Come on, bro. So they laughed him off and they gave him a 4-year suspension and said, this is your first test. This is your first failure. You're not a USADA guy, but we're going to hit you as hard as we can possibly hit you for aggravating circumstances, for falsified evidence, for all of the things that can sum up on that 5-letter word right there, because, oh my God, this guy, he'll be 41 years young when he is allowed to fight in a USADA licensed jurisdiction. And the problem that he is facing is that some international organizations don't do USADA, but they may follow WADA. So they may say, hey, we respect your ban. We won't bring a fighter in. So this guy has shot himself in the foot in a lot of places. There's still places he can fight. And his career will still continue doing whatever he likes to do here. But let me tell you what, this is not the way to go about a drug test. This is like Cody McKenzie level of absolute train wrecks. So
we're saying versus Brandon Vera in 6 months?
Yeah, probably about 4.5.
Right.
We're gonna give it to him.
Rising, come on, guys.
Yeah.
Oh man. So Blaine, what is your I'm not surprised Mr. Falcon's
I'm talking
this
Topuria and Roman, however you say his last name, continuing the Georgian invasion of 2020. A lot of places have had bad 2020s, but Georgia, the country, has not. They have had amazing success inside the octagon. 1 defeat. The men are undefeated. And Topuria and Roman, they both look like great fighters, specifically Topuria. I really like what I'm seeing from these guys. You know, you got Marab, you got Giga Chikadze, you've got all of these Georgians coming into the UFC. It's on the border of Dagestan. So these are secondhand wrestlers that wrestle every day of their lives, and they're really good at it. But what's really scary about these guys is they're getting good elsewhere too. Striking, you got Giga Chikadze is a kickboxer. But you've got like Taporia, who's a submission machine, coming in here using his hands. This story's not long. It's just to the point. Georgia is invading the UFC.
All right. All right. So I'm not surprised Mr. Falcon's moment comes courtesy of Jorge Masvidal. Today it was announced that he will be appearing on MTV Cribs.
What?
I didn't know that show was still a thing. So I'm genuinely surprised. MTV Cribs is still on, and for some reason Jorge Masvidal is there. And the only clips they released, I saw them on Twitter, it was like at ATT. So I don't know if he's going to show off the ATT dorms or it's supposed to be a day in the life of, but then that's not Cribs, but still sounds like it sucks. So
last time I saw Cribs, it was like Redman, like showing you how you had to touch the two wires together to ring his doorbell.
Yeah, and he was showing his favorite frying pan. Like that's the last time I've watched MTV Cribs.
I think it was Marilyn Manson's one of the ones I saw a long time ago.
Yeah, like this is how long ago this show was relevant. I'll steal one from one of my favorite Twitter followers, Jordan Patu, who was wondering when with such an outdated show, wondering when Jorge was going to appear on Pimp My Ride. So
that's what I want.
That's
what I want.
That's all that's left. So we need to see Pimp My Ride. All right, gentlemen. So we're gonna move on from there. We had some really surprising news break. I believe that was Saturday night or Friday night. I'm not saying Jorge Masvidal. His buddy Yoel Romero has now officially parted ways with the UFC. Apparently, he had 3 fights left on his contract. When questioned about this after the event Saturday, Dana White said, prepare yourselves, get your raincoats on. There will be more bloodletting. 60 fighters he's anticipating to be eliminated from the UFC roster. Rachel Ostovich later on, I think it was earlier today at the time we record this, it was announced that she was cut. What are we making of this? I know I've made my opinion about this pretty clear. They are saving money by getting rid of top talent, guys like Jussier Formiga, guys like Yoel Romero, in order to make way for the cheap talent that comes courtesy of the Contender Series. Blaine, I know you did write quite a piece on this over the weekend. So what are your thoughts on this? I know you took a more nuanced approach than I do. I'm more of the shotgun, and you approached it with a surgical blade.
The UFC have the best middleweights. But one time, one promotion, they beat them. Bellator. You have 2 contracts like me. Now go. Take a Gegard Mousasi belt.
It's nice Diddy boxing you just showed up there.
So look, you inspired me on this, and it was beautiful. So basically, what I believe is going on is Yoel Romero, Max Holloway, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, these people who have been there and can't be the champion anymore, cost a lot of money. The UFC wants cheap talent and new stories. You can't keep letting Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski fight. There's going to come a day when the UFC decides to part ways with these talents and looking for the next superstar, and they're looking for the next title contender that's not a rematch. They've realized that rematches don't sell anymore, and they want new names, and they're trying to build new names. And these young guys coming in, they're cheaper, and they'll do it for cheaper too. So, yeah, that's what's happening right now. They're just trying to cut costs, especially in the COVID era where there's no gate and the UFC's losing money on that. They can't afford to keep all these people. So while I don't think Max Holloway or somebody like Jeremy Stevens and all these guys are at risk of being cut, I think in the future we'll see more names like them cut. Corey Anderson's another really good example of that. While he wasn't a cut, it was a mutual parting of ways. UFC had no problem because you messed up Johnny Walker, who we would have liked to see get beat up by John Jones.
You know what? You definitely brought up some good names there. I actually think Johnny Walker might be one of the guys that could be on the chopping block.
I agree.
I think about the booking with Anthony Pettis that we just talked about. sounds like a guy who's pretty expensive. Keep in mind, even at UFC 223, when they needed him more than he needed them, they refused to match which, at least from what I've heard, a pretty reasonable price to get a last-minute title fight in against Khabib Nurmagomedov, especially considering the calamity that event was. So they've shown that they're not willing to pay for certain people, no matter how talented, no matter how big of a name. You look at some of the bigger names, a guy like an Anthony Pettis or a guy like Yoel Romero, where they've put a fairly decent amount of marketing muscle behind them, and looking at the balance sheet and like, is this paying off, at least according to the profit margins that we want to see anymore? Jay, Ben, like, do you have any other names that you think sound like they should be on the chopping block?
I have about probably
Curtis Blades.
I mean, no, I think they're still hoping that Blades gets a title shot because he hasn't gotten one yet, and
it depends on
if he loses to Derek Lewis.
If he loses to Derek Lewis, I mean, maybe, but he beats everybody else in the division. But I have like one big name at every division. Like Joe Benavidez probably doesn't have much time left. I mean, because from what I'm getting from this release, the Yoel Romero, which by the way, this was from what we've understood, is a requested release from Romero when there was a trouble about booking and getting him going and getting a fight and whatever was going on, and said, I want out like Corey Anderson. But I can also see this is what I'm calling the Liz Carmouche effect, in that the UFC will take a title challenger, maybe even a former champion, and say, you're very expensive. We don't see you getting another a title shot anytime soon. You lost a title shot badly, so you're not really in that position. You're not going to win a belt, so we're going to let you go. So like I can see like Benavidez is a prime example of the ultimate bridesmaid of the flyweight division. I mean, I wouldn't say like a Cody Garbrandt, but maybe a Garbrandt. Yair Rodriguez, I think the UFC is probably preparing to move on from. I think Rafael Dos Anjos, the Paul Felder fight, I think Dos Anjos could have been another such candidate to get rid of. We know Leon Edwards is not in the good graces of the UFC, so that's kind of something. And Tyron Woodley is also a persona non grata, so I can see those. Romero is middleweight. For light heavyweight, I mean, maybe an Anthony Smith. Had he lost to Devin Clark, definitely Anthony Smith. And at heavyweight, I mean, you have a crop of names of guys that are stuck, that can't win a title shot. But you know who I'm thinking is going to go? And it depends on this weekend. Junior Dos Santos. I think he very possibly could. I mean, if he loses to Cyril Gane, I mean, that's going to be a wrap for him, I think, because that will be a 3-fight losing streak, a 4-fight losing streak if he loses to Cyril Gane. So I can see the UFC very, very easily parting ways with aging top tier talent, top 10 fighters to say, you had your time, we're out. We're going to pick up the I think it's a G who calls it the Contender Series puppy mill. So yeah, that rings true very strongly to me. I feel that in my heart of hearts.
Go ahead, Ben.
No, well, all I'll say is I'm not saying that I agree with it, but as a philosophy for maintaining their roster, it's not new and it is defensible. The idea that, you know what, we're not going to keep around a John Fitch, Yushin Okami, who we know is not going to beat the sitting champ because they lost to them in a way we don't ever need to see again. And we don't want them just sitting around and knocking off new contenders at a high price tag for another 5 years. So, you know, it's understandable, even if I don't like it, and it's not how I would choose to have them do it. The problem right now is that they're making these huge slashes of talented fighters, and what they're bringing in is not. It's not worth it. Like most of what's coming from the Contender Series just is not worth it. They would have been better off just buying out Brave CF in March.
It's not a bad.
Like over half of their really impressive debuts this year seem to have come through that promotion. It's right next door to Abu Dhabi. Just buy out Brave CF and move all their fighters over to Fight Island. But, you know, slashing top level contenders, and just bringing in not ready for primetime players from the Contender Series, they're mortgaging 2021 and 2022. I don't know what it's going to happen that year, but it might be a time of rare opportunity for other promotions around the world to pick up some of these people and really upgrade.
Can I chime in for a second here?
Please.
You mentioned Brave. I'm of the opinion right now that the UFC hasn't bought anyone in a long time for a specific reason. It's because they can't afford to. They're paying that big loan back, and that you're seeing a lot of other promotions thrive under this. They don't have everybody under their thumb. So you got Brave. You've got Cage Warriors is doing well, but they're a feeder league. But you got like One and Bellator. PFL's doing well. PFL would have never come around, and we saw what happened with World Series of Fighting. They died. But now that the UFC is bound to the master of debt, they can't buy these promotions up that have good things anymore. And I think that's good for the sport as a whole. I think this loan that they've taken out, $4 billion, is going to pave way for the Ali Act, with other fighters going to other promotions, and fighters going to start calling for more shots, not just against UFC fighters, but against each other. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the future here, which is great for the sport. It's going to be bad for cards because we're going to get top-heavy cards like boxing, but it's going to grow the sport tremendously internationally. I think I've brought it up on someone else's podcast. The UFC has 600-700 fighters on its roster. The lightweight division in all of boxing has 2,000 people in lightweight alone. So I feel like we're going to start seeing a lot more diversification in promotions.
What can I just throw in one last thing? One thing that the UFC has that they did not have during kind of their big acquisition phase when they bought out Pride, IFL, Strikeforce, WEC, they now have Fight Pass. So they can basically rent these promotions just by signing into deals with Fight Pass. Because now LFA, Titan, Invicta, people sign with those leagues because they're going to be on Fight Pass, and they see it as a step to the UFC. So it's kind of a weird. It's not as much of a power move. It's just, buying somebody's shit up, but it's kind of a sneaky end around to having their shadow over these other promotions. But it certainly doesn't touch Bellator, One, or PFL.
And also we have to keep in mind too, the antitrust suit is still going on. So they have a reason to not just go out and buy a promotion right now, because that's evidence against them. When these hearings resume. So I do think though that this is as you said, Ben, this is a unique time where I think a lot of other promotions can gain some serious ground as far as the market share is concerned. The UFC, by dropping a guy like Yoel Romero, it sent a very clear message. That clear message is that the level of excitement that you bring to the cage doesn't matter. You being a fan favorite doesn't matter. What matters is we want something cheap. That is the message that they have hammered home. How in one breath can you say, you can be on the podium and say, like, our roster is so overinflated, we have to get rid of 60 people, yet you signed pretty much everyone that fought on the Contender Series this season. Those two statements just don't make sense when coupled next to one another. So I think this is a unique time where a lot of top level talent is going to find itself floating about. If the other promotions, if Bellator, One, PFL, ACB, and everywhere else, if they start and rising, they start sort of consolidating their resources and make sure co-promotion is a real thing among them, there will be some serious competition. But I do also want to mention, once again, we got promotions out here lying about who they want to sign. Bellator and PFL talking about they don't want Yoel Romero. Get all the way the fuck up out of here with that lie. I'm not hearing it.
There's a couple things that stick out to me. First of all, I should point out women's divisions, Claudia Gadelia, maybe Michelle Watterson and Carla Esparza are definitely those kinds of fighters that the UFC want to get rid of. I'm sure the UFC would love to dump Jessica Ai and probably Holly Holm because she keeps stocking up contenders, her Jermaine Durand or me. But the more important thing that I wanted to point out that I keep seeming to forget here and there is that the UFC has kind of able to control the narrative, because this was the story of the week when Yoel Romero was released. And this was the one thing. So if the UFC lets fighters go one by one, they can control that, as it compared to January 1st. There's a 60 fighter cut. I no amount of stories that myself or Tristan Critchfield could write for Sherdog would be able to do the justice if there's a huge dump in fighters, which I think would almost be strategic for the UFC. That way, it's boom, here it is. It's a severance. It's just the end game. And I don't know if I like that, because could you imagine having to try and piece together a story where you lose multiple top 10 fighters in one swell foop?
And imagine the aftermath, where we have a fight card similar to what we experience on a regular basis, even the upcoming pay-per-view, even the last pay-per-view, where it isn't really top heavy on names. We don't really have a whole lot of marquee names throughout there, and it's a lot of things that are pretty forgettable for the most part there. And then imagine Ryzen is putting on Ryzen and Bellator are co-promoting, like Yoel versus Anderson or something like that. Like, which one are you going to watch?
Yeah.
I think that's a big question that the UFC is going to answer for a lot of people by the roster moves that they're making. But at the same time, they kind of don't care when you've got guaranteed money floating in. So the main objective for them, it seems to be, just make sure that we have this amount of time on the broadcast, make sure this amount of warm bodies can put on some Reebok, soon to be Venom, and step into the octagon and take the check at the end of the night. That seems to be the way the promotion is operating right now.
I wrote about this on either My MMA News or Rockfin, one of the two. The COVID era, it was Rockfin actually, the COVID era of the UFC. And I think I'm going to play a little devil's advocate here. The UFC, they got the ESPN money out there, and they're trying to get that $750 million by putting in all of these cards. So what they're having to do to keep these cards afloat, I'm almost positive there is a minimum fight number that they have to have on these ESPN cards for it to count. So they're going out there and signing whoever they can. Like, I love Jared Gooden to death. It's the first guy I ever interviewed, but Jesus Christ, he does not belong in the UFC yet. We saw that against Joban. There's these other guys out there too, like Reese McKee doesn't look like he's ready for the UFC yet. And they're signing all these people, robbing the scene of regional MMA that is already struggling with the pandemic, robbing them of their regional stars, and they're going to have to cut these guys because they're not ready for the UFC. Do you really want a watered-down product, or do you want them to put out the best product that they can? And I understand cutting Yoel Romero is part of the best product, but the UFC is also looking at Yoel Romero's age, his recent record, and he really hasn't produced much. The last fight with Izzy was abysmal. Let's not forget that. Yoel's exciting, yeah, sure, but let's not forget him standing in the middle of the octagon for 1 minute. And that felt like an eternity. So the UFC is going to have to cut some of these guys. And it's going to suck. Like we saw him recently call back Tai Tuivasa, who got cut. Betch Correa got called back. Why is Betch here? She doesn't belong. She really doesn't. But she's getting her retirement fight because they need to fill out a card and she's a name. So it's just, they have to. I kind of understand what they're doing, and it sucks for the fighters at the same time. But this is what happens when a promotion has too much power.
Mm-hmm. Well said. So let's move things along here, because we definitely could talk about this topic forever and a day because it opens up so many doors. But the first order of business for me right now is to make sure the clock is ready. We are going to play the speed bag, and it's pretty cool. We got an extra person now, so this is going to be a round robin between you three. You're going to have 10 seconds to answer all of these questions, and I will start with you first, Jay. So question one: should the UFC rebook Edwards versus Chimaev when Edwards recovers, or should it go in a different direction?
Throw this in the dumpster, in the outside garbage. Make Chimaev versus, I don't know, Tim Means or something. Just stop with the top 5 thing.
Ben.
I mean, assuming the reasons they booked it in the first place haven't changed, I guess book it again. I don't like it either, but if you wanted the fight, I guess make it.
Blaine.
Yes, rebook this. I want to see Leon Edwards boringly defeat Chimaev with footwork and jabs.
All right. Okay, Ben, next question is going to start with you. Demetrious Johnson is fighting for the one championship belt in February. Has MMA forgotten about him?
I don't think they've forgotten about him, but they've certainly moved past him in the pound for pound discussion. He's just falling off of that.
Blaine.
Yes, everybody forgot about him, and y'all must have forgot because Mighty Mouse is still top 5 pound for pound in the world. He should have gone to Rising.
And Jay.
Yes, they absolutely forgotten about him, and for good reason. Demetrious Johnson has not fought in 2020. It'll be like 18 months between his last fight.
All right, so Blaine, you will start off the last question. Minowa man is coming out of retirement on New Year's Eve to fight a 1-0 sumo wrestler. How does that make you feel, sir?
Nostalgic. Remember UFC 1.
All right. Oh, I messed up the clock. So go ahead, Ben.
Those who do not learn the lessons of history are doomed to repeat it. Does this sumo man not know that beating fat, untrained guys is all Minowa can do? You're going to get triangled. You're going to have red Speedo nuts on your face for New Year's Eve, and you will deserve it.
Jay.
I can't wait. I can't wait for No Man to get a win like this, doing exactly what he does, that his claim to fame. Super Cluck belt all the way, baby.
All right, so now the clock shall reset to 30 seconds. I will give myself that time to answer all 3 questions in succession. The clock will start as soon as I finish reading the very first question. So, should the UFC rebook Edwards versus Chimaev when Edwards recovers, or should it go in a different direction? Man, if they don't just leave this foolishness alone, throw it in rice, get rid of it. Edwards and Chimaev do not belong in the same sentence right now. Demetrious Johnson has not been forgotten by the MMA community, but the UFC is trying to make us forget about him with that propaganda they was putting on the last flyweight title fight. And this New Year's Eve fight, I mean, this New Year's Eve, I want foolishness. So yes, red sumo nuts all over the broadcast. Let's get it.
Throw it in rice like a phone that you dropped in the toilet. That is my new favorite expression for a fight that sucks.
Man,
throw it in rice.
Yeah.
Trash. Straight gutter trash. All right, fellas. So because we did go over just a little bit there, we're gonna skip things along to highlight one thing that you like about Bellator 254. It's going to be Thursday night. McFarlane and Velasquez in the title fight at the main event. So, Jay, give me one fight that you're looking forward to on this card.
Man, I'm kind of grateful that there's 10 fights on this card now, that a fight fell off of it. And I mean no disrespect to the fighters involved, but I'm so spent with long Bellator cards. So a 10-fight offering on a Thursday at 4 o'clock to be done with it, to be done with all the fights by 10 o'clock is great. That said, there are probably more Magomedovs in the Fight Finder database than any other human's name by a country mile. So I am truly interested to see how Tiger, this is his nickname, so that is how we will refer to him probably, can do, coming off of a bunch of great ACB performances a couple years ago. This is a guy who is still a young, I don't know if I can call him a prospect, with like almost 20 fights under his belt and a champion in ACB, but I guess he's kind of a prospect. I'm looking forward to seeing if Bellator is for real when it comes to signing prospects and not doing the Yoel Romero, Fabricio Verdum thing. So if the Magomedov fight works out, I am all for it. Let's get that one.
All right, Ben, what's one that you're looking forward to on this?
I'm just going to go with like the garbage matchup that's going to give us a fun finish. I like Romero Cotton versus Justin Sumter. Romero Cotton is a perfect example of Bellator bringing along promising prospects in just a calm, conservative, sensible way. And they're putting them in against Justin Sumter, someone who got smacked up by Maki Patolo on the Contender Series in his last fight. Romero should knock this man like all the way out of the fight sphere, and halfway back to New York. So this is great. And I can't wait.
All right. So Blaine did not want to share his his pick for Bellator.
He's a Fort Sumter fan.
He says, "Screw this." So I'll just go ahead and drop mine. Let me make sure that looking at the right screen. Okay, so I'm going to go with the card opener. That's between Robson Gracie Jr. and Billy Goff. It's always something special when a Gracie steps in the cage, and paired with Bellator's matchmaking for newcomers, this should be a nice way to see someone get turned into a pretzel. So I can't say that I'm not looking forward to seeing a human being turn into a pretzel. So it should be a fun time. I really like the Thursday night for Bellator. I really love that. And it starts so early too. So like I'm actually doing my work for like my real work, and I'm watching fights at the same time. It's fantastic. Don't tell my boss. Now, let's move on from here because we have UFC 256 coming to us Saturday night. Deiveson Figueiredo fighting for the second time in 3 weeks. He will be defending his title against Brandon Morono. Now, let's go ahead and give some shine to the top 3 fights on the card. Looks like Blaine is joining us again. So, Jacare Souza, Kevin Holland, who you got?
I'm a fan of momentum. I believe that it matters to an extent, and I believe that you can really go far if you're in a positive mindset, and other cliches that I could throw on the desk. But really, this is by a wide margin. I mean, he fought Thiago Santos before Thiago Santos was Thiago Santos, but this is his toughest fight. And that's weird because Jacare Souza is well over 40 now. And he's on a losing streak, and his performances have not been particularly stellar. And it's been a few years since he's picked up a win. So as long as Holland, this is might sound crazy. I think I'm going for the upset here. No, it's not. Kevin Holland is a betting favorite against Jacare Souza.
Yep.
I'd like to reiterate that because that actually, I am surprised, Mr. Falcons, because this is still Jacare Souza that we're talking about here. Give me Holland faster, quicker, which is 2 different things, obviously, when it comes to striking. And I think this is going to be that fight where we really see the age cliff come in for Jacare. So I think Holland's going to probably do what I said would happen a few weeks ago, that he will suddenly put himself in the title picture with an unexpected top-level opponent and have a prime position to be up there challenging for a title in a year or so. So let's get weird.
All right. Blaine, Jacare and Kevin Holland, who you got? Oh, unmute. Oh, yeah. Let's see. He is muted still. So, we'll go to Ben. Ben, Jacare versus Kevin Holland. Who you got?
This is one that I would have picked wrong this past weekend. Just kind of like I thought OSP was going to be too much too soon. I'm not making that mistake again. Obviously, these are 2 different guys, but the general dynamic is the same. And Holland really seems to have buckled down. He's not making the same kind of like mental lapses or lapses in concentration that he did a few fights ago that might give an opening for someone like Jacare to really take advantage. I think Holland's just going to win a pretty straightforward fight. I don't think Jacare is going to be able to get it to the ground. And where he was once a very, very good striker for as good a grappler as he was, I don't think he's going to have much for Holland on the feet either. Just give me Holland by decision.
All right. This one I'm really back and forth with, because I think under normal circumstances with the schedule Kevin Holland has been on, and granted that schedule has been because the circumstances are not normal, I would favor him over Jacare slightly though. I think it will be one of those like breakout performances. But man, I have a very difficult time picking somebody who still has COVID-19 or might still have, or just tested negative like yesterday or something like that. I have a very hard time going that far. I have a very hard time going for someone to have the best performance of their career, at least against the best opposition of their career, just days after getting scratched from a card because they have COVID-19. That being said, I mean, Jacare had it too. There was a few months back, not sure. I don't remember any reports about the level of symptoms that he may or may not have had. But if he's rebooked to fight him, I guess he's healthy. I'll just assume everything is okay with both men physically, and I'll go Kevin Holland. Very reluctant to do that, but we'll see what happens. And I think it's very interesting for the division. Adonis, I don't know if he agrees or not. He's voicing his opinion. We'll get his opinion on the other fights as well. All right. So Jay, I'll start with you on this one. Tony Ferguson, Do Bronx, Charles Oliveira. Who you got?
You know, it's kind of funny because this is I don't want to say it's a similar situation to the OSP Hill fight, but Tony Ferguson is going to be 37 in a couple months. Which is very surprising to me because you feel like he's a lot younger of a guy, but then you think of his past and where your kid at and all the stuff that we had to deal with back in the tough days. So yeah, Tony Ferguson is getting to that age where we're going to wonder, because we know historically younger fighters don't fare well in the lighter weight classes, and 155 is one of those divisions. Who's the oldest lightweight? Masaranduba, is he still fighting? I mean, there aren't many 40-year-olds in the division that can really hold up. And Ferguson is getting there faster than he's, other guys. But I don't think he's done, and he's so unbelievably crafty to almost a frustrating degree, where writing up a play-by-play of his is just like, Ferguson did something weird, and it was successful in a surprising way. And his opponent stopped and had to stare at him for a moment because he didn't know what just happened. Like, this is a guy who took the shots that knocked out Edson Barboza and James Vick and Donald Cerrone. He took all of those shots in the first round and still made it to the bitter end, where he was, he almost couldn't walk anymore. And Justin Gaethje finally finished the job, which was, by the way, a very surprising performance. I love Do Bronx. I want to see him succeed, but this ain't the fight for him. I can't see Ferguson getting complacent. That's the word of the day, I think, is complacency, because all the topics we've had. But I just can't see Ferguson falling into the trap. I feel like we might see something like when Jack Hermansson fought Jacare, and we find out that Ferguson is going for the submission to try and tap out the submission guy. Like Tony Ferguson's the kind of guy who will try and submit Charles Oliveira. So yeah, give me Tony Ferguson in this fight.
All right, Blaine, Ferguson and Do Bronx, who you got?
Well, first of all, my phone died, but I'm at the house with a charger, so we're good now. Whew, it's been a struggle today. Anyway, so Tony Ferguson and Do Bronx. This is the worst fight for Do Bronx. Do Bronx has gas tank issues, and we see that time and time again. He gets tired. His striking's become really good recently, but Tony Ferguson's the type of guy that's just going to eat it. And, he doesn't hit as hard as Justin Gaethje, so he's not going to get knocked out unless he took irreversible damage from Justin Gaethje. So, I lean towards Tony. I wouldn't be surprised if Do Bronx does it, but Tony Ferguson, this is the type of fight he's going to drag out into deep waters and really, really see what Oliveira's made of.
Extra credit for inserting Tony Ferguson, the type of guy too. That was very smoothly done. Ben, Ferguson and Do Bronx, who you got?
I'm with Blaine in that for most of their entire careers in the UFC, this would be just the most dreadful mismatch for Oliveira among any two people remotely within contention. Like, take any two guys in the top 20 in this division, and this is the worst matchup for Oliveira. The only dynamic is that Ferguson is aging. He's reaching an age where, even if we weren't talking about an injury-prone fighter who makes it a point of pride to come back unhealthily early from serious injuries, we'd be worried about a competitive decline. Whereas Oliveira, I mean, he's still a glass cannon, but he's not the head case he was a few years ago. He's fighting the best he ever has in his career. I still don't think that's enough to meet in the middle. I think Ferguson gets this done, and I think he kind of serves us a little bit of a reminder just by how thoroughly he beats Oliveira and how easy he makes it look.
Yeah, it's hard for me to disagree with that, Ben. I see Tony Ferguson winning this, and I think even if Do Bronx gives him trouble, he's shown himself able to go through adversity many, many times before and come out on top. Oliveira, on the other hand, tends to wilt. the moment he gets pushed back. So it's very difficult for me, even with the improvements Oliveira has made, even with the question marks surrounding Tony Ferguson, what he has left after that absolute beatdown that he endured from Justin Gaethje a few months back. It's very, very difficult to see a world where Ferguson loses to Oliveira. And I think even the ways that I would envision Oliveira winning that matchup, I don't think Tony is going to present, the sort of like weird wrestling that can lead to your neck sticking out. Like, Ferguson is so good in those positions and even inviting the danger because he's trying to counter that or something. I could see him sticking his neck out to set something just nuts up. Ferguson is just a weird dude, and I think you can't really prepare for him the way you would anyone else. So I say Tony wins this, and I think it's going to look pretty easy on his part too.
So are we all in agreement that whoever wins this will not go to the judges? This will end by stoppage one way or another?
Yeah, stoppage.
Yeah, pretty certain that.
It will be, if that's the case, it'll be the 15th consecutive fight for Oliveira to not go the distance. So mayhem.
Yeah, these are two guys who don't need the judges very often. Like, the judges normally like take a bathroom break or something. Not that they were paying attention anyway. So
we're playing Game Boy.
All right, so now we have the main event, the flyweight title between Deiveson Figueiredo and Brandon Morono. Jay, who you got?
I like what Morono brings to the table, and I enjoy the kind of fight that he can bring out of guys, that he can really have some incredibly fun grappling exchanges, which, I don't know if Figueiredo will oblige him. Figueiredo is a very offensive grappler. He is I'm going to take a limb, a neck, mostly a neck, and he will take it and squeeze the life out of it. So I can see for the first couple minutes this being an absolute dynamite fight. I can see it kind of like the Royval fight, actually. I can see the Morono-Royval playing out similarly to Figueiredo-Morono, in that it will be a mad dash, and that's it will. My lock of the night is that somebody may, on the broadcast towards the end of the night, say something along the lines of, and people wanted to get rid of this division. Like that's the kind of feeling that this fight is going to bring to me. But I can't look past Figueiredo's run. Like, his only weakness that we have seen is that when Formiga took him down, he was able to keep Figueiredo down for long enough to not to nullify the offensive guard that Figueiredo had and kind of stop the scrambles. Now, Morono is a pretty good grappler. He can hit a good takedown. He's very fast at them, which might surprise Figueiredo. He might even hit a takedown in the early part of the round and just go, whoa, oh my God. But this scramble city will probably turn into a messy slugfest that I don't see Morono getting out of. So, like, if they nullify in the grappling and they go back and forth and then they both stand up, that's when Figueiredo can go, okay, I got you now, and I can, try and knock your head off and do what I did to Joe Benavidez. So I can see probably like a second round knockout for Figueiredo, but I'm looking at this as my fight of the night over Ferguson Oliveira and over Swanson Pineda. I think this has the potential to be my fight of the night.
All right, Ben, title fight at the top of the card. Who you got?
For me, the only real question is how Figueiredo will look after having to make weight twice in this few weeks. Other than that, Moreno's just not ready for this. Ignore what Moreno's record looks like, because he has a ton of submissions on his record. At the UFC level, he's a guy that wins frantic kickboxing matches with a lot of scrambles thrown in. All of that is danger zone for him against Deiveson Figueiredo. Figueiredo is a guy who has gotten where he is by managing his gas tank and not getting drawn into the truly wild fights. He won't be suckered into that by Morono. And as one of the few people who correctly picked Formiga to beat Figueiredo, that's not a blueprint to beating Deiveson Figueiredo. Like, your blueprint can't start with be one of the 3 greatest back control specialists in MMA history. Like, if you can't get past that, then you can't follow the rest of this blueprint. And if you're not that, it doesn't even really matter how good a grappler you are. because Figueiredo is more than capable of taking care of himself, unless he just can't scrape your harmless ass off his back. So this is another one where unless Figueiredo just looks like dead man walking on the scale, he's going to run right through Morono, which is a shame because Morono has improved enormously in the past year or two. And this is a fight that might look differently in another year, assuming Figueiredo is still even a flyweight at that time. But right now, too much, too soon. Figueiredo finds something and just blows Morono out of there within the first 3 rounds.
All right, Blaine, who you got?
All right, so I want to start off by saying that Brandon Moreno is also making weight our second time in 2 weeks as well. He fought on the same card as Figgy. I said on Twitter the other day that, and I felt it was very, very appropriate, Deiveson Figueiredo is basically Mighty Mouse's Wario. He's just a wild man that's very, very technical. I really don't see a path to victory at all for Brandon Moreno here. I may be counting him out. The young man's very good, but Figgy's just invincible, it seems like, and there's nobody beating him at 125 or 135.
Okay. All right. I see what you did there.
Get back in here, Cejudo.
Petr Yan.
I
can't beat him, bro.
I mean, I don't see any.
Pieces are beating Petr Yan though, so I don't know.
I just don't see any way for Figueiredo to drop this one. I think the positions where Morono has the best chance, like initiating the scrambles and all that, those are places where your neck gets taken. Those are also places where you get hit. When you get hit by someone with Figueiredo's power, you tend to get busted up pretty bad. You tend to fall asleep. I think everything Morono is going to want to do is going to set him up to get damaged and get battered. I will be very surprised if this makes it to the 3rd round. I'll be very, very surprised. I think Morono could possibly be the future of this division, but the future is not now. This is going to be Figueiredo ceiling fighter of the year. I think Saturday. So that's who I got. So that is going to do it for this edition of Unleashed. I want to thank Blaine for jumping on the show. And because he has a gift of sarcasm and wit, he didn't put his Twitter handle at the bottom there. So your Twitter handle is at Blaine Henry, correct?
At Blaine Henry TFL, the Fight Library.
Oh, cool. I'm
branding.
Sorry. No, yeah, absolutely branding. So yeah, so we'll have the link to his Twitter in the description. And Jay and Ben, you know where to find their work. You can find them on SureDog.com. You can check my workout on MMA On Point, Karate Combat if they put any of it out, and the Body Lock. Yeah, I'm actually going to do some stuff for Body Lock tonight too. But anyway, Blaine on My MMA News and the Fight Library. So like, subscribe, share, tell a friend to tell a friend, tell that friend to tell 10 more friends, and stay beautiful, stay positive, and stay sexy. I'll see you when I see you. Peace.